I'm George Galloway.
And I'm Steve Topple.
And together we're Topple Galloway. Well, I don't know if you heard it for all the suede shoes that were on display, but you certainly saw the People's Vote March at the weekend.
I did indeed, yes. So, so we had allegedly 700,000 people, well-heeled with their Waitrose taffeta bags and their whatever they have for lunch, possibly quinoa, maybe. The 700,000
quinoa was sold out in London.
Oh, was it? Oh, yes, yes. But is it to do with Brexit? Are we going to have a shortage of quinoa? Is that what it's really about?
Oh my goodness! No wonder they're panicking.
Indeed, but
kimchi. There was no kimchi to be found anywhere.
700,000 people out for a People's Vote March campaigning for the public to have the final say on the EU referendum. Now, aside from the democratic issues here, I have an issue with the demographic of the people marching. I'm the first one to bang on social media about the fact that they all seem fairly white, they all seem fairly middle class, they all seem fairly liberal, and a lot of them seem fairly obnoxious, the likes of Chuka Umunna and Alistair Campbell, Anna Salisbury out in force promoting this.
In front, they're the leaders.
Yep, and I was ticked off by quite a few people on social media who said, well, look, I'm not like that. I support Corbyn. I rely on benefits from the Department for Work and Pensions.
The march was against Corbyn.
This is the thing. And so people saying, we're not like that. That's not what it's about. Even the majority of them were, to be fair, but I'm sure there were some exceptions. And so that did throw me slightly. I had to pause and think for a minute about what I was saying about the people who are out on this march. I still maintain that it's a very liberal, fairly elite club of people calling for this. The people who are leading it anyway are. And while I accept that, okay, so the demographic might be more diverse than maybe I considered, I think my point and my feeling about this still stands. That essentially this is a very dangerous move when we're already seeing the far right on the ascension. We're already seeing white working class communities feeling like they're being completely ignored already, and they have been ignored for decades. And it concerns me immensely as well that the kind of people who would be, say, reliant on Department for Work and Pensions welfare, who would be Corbyn supporters, don't have the insight and the nuanced thinking around this to realise, well, hang on a minute, this is actually quite a dangerous move. And moreover, while we're talking about Brexit, there have been far worse things meted out on this country in the past 8 years than that, and maybe the most sensible thing would be to call for a general election. It concerns me that some people who I would expect to be understanding this is just my opinion, obviously, who I would expect to be understanding this, are not getting this message. And I mean, you can't deny 700,000 people is a lot of people for a London march. It's far more than have been out on any anti-austerity protest I've been in, any march for the NHS I've been on. It's certainly more than any damn march for disabled people that I've ever been on. I didn't see any of these people on any of those marches. So you can't deny that there's obviously a feeling here, but as I say, it concerns me that this is a very worrying message and a very worrying move, and I think you agree with my sentiments.
Well, I do, although I'd go farther than you. You know, beware the quiet people of England, they haven't spoken yet, as almost a right-wing poet once said. If you wanted to design a scenario in which UKIP would be the least of your worries, where a gigantic surge was injected into the body of a potential really right-wing backlash in Britain, you'll betray Brexit. If you want 500, 600, 700,000 petty bourgeois, soft shoe shufflers to bring about the betrayal of Brexit, then millions, many millions of the people who haven't spoken yet, at least since the referendum, would be energized beyond belief, because a myth would automatically arise that the nation had been stabbed in the back. Yep. The Conservatives would run a campaign which said that Labour, if it were to go along with this, which is the purpose of the march,
no, of course.
that's why Corbyn is the focus of the march. Where's Jeremy Corbyn? They're all singing.
Doing some bloody good work at the UN, actually. But anyway,
rather more important than munching kimchi in the sun in central London.
Yes.
But if Labour were to facilitate the victory of the chiffon scarves and the expensive cologne, the backlash against Labour amongst working class people and people that are out of the political system at the moment would be very considerable. So I regard it as terrifyingly dangerous. Now, you're right. A lot of people, by which I mean 10, have written to me saying, you know, they had a backpack on, their shoes were secondhand, and they shop at Tesco and so on. Of course, we're partly lampooning them.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you something, that until, and indeed on the Judgment Day, I will say, I would never march behind Alistair Campbell, dripping in the blood of 1 million Iraqis. Tony Blair's Goebbels. You march behind Alistair Campbell, if you like. And don't get me started on Chuka Umunna. Donald Trump's not the sort of guy to go for a walk in the woods, as he was hunting beaver. Not like Ronald Reagan, who went for a walk in the woods with Mikhail Gorbachev and saved the world, arguably, with the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty. This banned thousands of nuclear missiles that were already in Europe, Steve. You're too young to remember.
I am.
It's time to dust down your CND membership card, because in the 1980s, CND was a mass movement in this country, moving hundreds of thousands of people, by the way, on marches. For the only time in its history. They've got a long and honourable history, of course, but it became a mass movement in the 1980s because Reagan had stationed cruise and Pershing missiles, land-based missiles, in Europe. The Soviet Union, as then was, responded with its SS-20 land-based nuclear missiles in Eastern Europe. And it looked like, it genuinely did look like, it could be the end of the world. Because, of course, once you lower the threshold for nuclear war, start talking about mini nuclear weapons, limited nuclear war. In other words, a nuclear war that only happened to us in Europe, but didn't touch either the Soviet Union or the United States. You were lowering the threshold, making the tripwire more likely to be tripped. So the treaty banned and demolished literally thousands of such nuclear weapons. And they've been banned ever since, because that's what Reagan and Gorbachev agreed in 1988. Donald Trump, supposedly the puppet of Putin, supposedly a Russian agent, has just walked out of that treaty, yet another treaty that he's ripped up in plain sight, unilaterally. And he said that the US is going to begin again both building and, presumably, if the Europeans are stupid enough to let them, field and deploy these nuclear weapons. Russia has said, Lavrov said, parity will be maintained by whatever means necessary. So either we'll have parity at 0, or we'll have parity at 10, 20, 30,000, as many as you like. Because China will join them in this, because the target in this for Trump is not just Russia, but China, which of course has virtually unlimited capacity, if it wanted to build up nuclear weapons of any range. It's very, very dangerous, not least because it's gone almost entirely unremarked. I haven't seen anything on the mainstream news about this at all.
No, there's been odd snippets here and there, because when I was sort of looking this up this morning, there's bits here and there's bits there and there's sort of other things here, but it's all very skewed towards towards Trump's agenda.
Yeah, Britain's backed it already.
Yeah, but
Germany's horrified.
Yeah,
mainland Europe is horrified.
Yeah,
Gavin Williamson, don't tell him your name, Pike. He has backed it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The takeaway for me from this story, or the takeaways rather from this story, are that firstly that Trump seems to have shaken off his deep state shackles in America, and he's on the run again. He's been released from his underground cage, because this is not a move that I believe the deep state in America would necessarily sanction.
No, as a matter of fact, the deep state and the liberals, who have filled the atmosphere for 2 whole years with the narrative that Trump is actually a Russian agent, are now horrified. They're now saying, he's gone mad.
Exactly, it's a brilliant double bluff, if anything, from Trump, isn't it? It's great. Yeah, so I think that's quite important. That's quite an important signal. But also Britain's position on this. I mean, it shows, for me, looking at the past 8 years as a sum of all things considered, and the way that under Cameron and Osborne, Britain and British policy, and especially sort of financial services, were very much aligning themselves with China, which they were. Britain was making very open manoeuvres towards China. I mean, we were the first country in the world to open a branch of I think it's the Chinese Infrastructure Bank, Chinese Investment Bank, much to America's horror. I remember this a couple of years ago. George Osborne did it.
Yes, Osborne was very into China,
making real manoeuvres towards, well, exactly, but also I think that sort of America's floundering, if you like, was that Britain were one step ahead, moving towards China. But now Theresa May's administration has just shat all over that, basically. With this
at the time when we're leaving the European Union.
Exactly.
I mean, totally
all these wonderful
sense.
trade deals that we're supposed to be signing with various countries, it seems mad.
It is a kind of madness. A sane British policy would be armed neutrality.
Yeah.
Keep our weapons, keep our military strength, such as it is, but be neutral, and be ready to make mutually beneficial trade deals with everybody. So that everybody has to include Russia and China. Instead, we're making an enemy of both. I mean, somebody pointed out the other day to the EU, Moscow is the biggest city in Europe. Russia is the biggest country in Europe, the most populous country in Europe. In fact, by the way, Russia is the biggest country in the whole world. And moreover, if you'll forgive the pun, Russia is a Siamese twin of China.
Yes.
So actually, you're talking about the biggest country in Europe, joined at the hip with the biggest country in the world, or the biggest economy in the world, with the biggest army in the world, the biggest population in the world. Instead of trying to be friends with that bloc, we're doing all that we can. This Williamson, who couldn't fight his way out of a paper bag.
Yes.
Don't tell him you didn't fight! He is almost declaring war on Russia.
It's very strange, isn't it? It's almost, it is literally, it conjures up images of the Dad's Army Cabinet, doesn't it? It's very,
the Dad's Army Cabinet.
The way they conduct themselves, it's very peculiar.
Theresa May as Captain Mannering.
Yes.
Is she going to still be here at Topple Galloway next week?
Well, yes, because breaking news before we started filming was rumours are abound that these 48 letters have been...
48 unicorns have suddenly materialised.
They have, yes. The 48 letters needed for a leadership challenge have apparently hit the 1922 committee like a feather duster. But it's being frantically denied by some sources. Other people are saying, well, this could be it. So Captain Mannering might be a goner by next week's Topple Galloway.
I feel it's on now. When Boris Johnson and David Davis both absented themselves from the House this week when Theresa May gave her report back. I mean, I don't know why she bothered with a report. She could have put it on the back of a postage stamp. The report back was that there was nothing to report back. And when they didn't show up for that, I felt that the game was on. I mean, in a sense, the Tories have got nothing to lose. They're headed for destruction if they keep her. They might still be headed for destruction if they go for Boris Johnson. Maybe they'll therefore go for an interim safe pair of hands.
Yes.
Don't believe him, Boris. Don't believe him. In David Davis, who'll say, I'll only take it for a limited time.
Or Jeremy Hunt, as you said last week. Yes.
He is Private Pike, actually.
Yeah,
I mean,
well,
if Williamson didn't exist.
No, he's the guy who put that light out. Put that light out.
We're all doomed.
Unless you were in an absolute vacuum or a bubble, which might have meant you on the People's March on Saturday, you can't have missed the story of the dear elderly lady, Delcy Gale, being horribly, filthily, quite frankly, disgustingly, racially abused by a man on a Ryanair flight. He called her an ugly fucking cunt. He called the lady an ugly black bastard through abuse at her daughter. And what did Ryanair do? Not our problem, Gov. They didn't even attempt to get this man off the flight. He told the woman that she would have to move, not him, but it's now in the hands of police. So, George, do we think this highly charged, it seemed racially motivated incident is more telling of what's going on in British society? Because there's been a lot of tweets on my timeline and a lot of chatter on social media about how we are slowly becoming viewed in the world, whether correctly or not, slowly becoming viewed in the world as this ethnically intolerant country now since the Brexit vote. And does this gammon-faced buffoon on this flight sum up the situation, do we think?
Well, before I turn to the incident, let me say something about Ryanair. This is an airline that seems to have a death wish. Not only have they massively inconvenienced hundreds of thousands of passengers as a result of their failure to remember that pilots have to have a summer holiday.
Oh, yes, yeah.
Not only have they alienated their staff by paying bottom dollar and demanding the biggest number of hours worked of any airline, not only did they float the idea of charging you 10 pence to go to the toilet on the flight, not only do they charge you if you turn up with a wallet which is slightly bigger than normal, they have a chief who goes out of his way to insult, traduce, ridicule his own customers. He is the Gerald Ratner of the airline business. So this one is of a piece. They moved the 77-year-old black woman, a widow. They moved her because she was getting racially abused by Gammon Face.
Yeah.
And worse than that, if it could be worse, even though this video has gone viral across the entire world, they haven't even phoned the woman yet. They haven't even sent her an apology. They never thought of sending her a bunch of flowers.
No.
Or a little Ryanair goodie bag. That would be goodie. They have a death wish as an airline. Do I accept your thesis? I'm afraid I don't.
Okay.
There have always been white people like that in an imperialist country like ours. We were built up to believe for 200 years we were superior to black people. Otherwise, how could we have the right to go and steal their country, steal their things, and even steal them as slaves if we weren't superior to them? There are a lot of such people in Britain. They existed before Brexit. They'll exist long after Brexit. And moreover, they exist all over the world. This is a white thing, not a British thing.
Yep.
If you think England's racist, you've never lived in France. The far right in France, the Tommy Robinsons in France are in Parliament.
Yeah.
Some of them are in government.
Indeed.
But they aren't in Britain.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think I hasten to correct. It wasn't my theses I was posing the question, because I do completely agree with you. What we've seen, especially over sort of the past 30 years, we were discussing this off air, and I think it's an important point to make on air, is that the triangulation of policy and of political science, if you like, by Tony Blair and Bill Clinton at the end of the 90s, this triangulation of a left-wing social agenda coupled with right-wing market-led economics into this hodgepodge and melting pot of everyone had to be politically correct and everyone had to identify by their sexuality or by their skin colour or by where they shopped in the supermarket or what they ate, as opposed to identifying by their class. We are now seeing the end game of that, because what's happened is the working class has been completely fragmented in this country, and white working class people personally have been forgotten about. I have to say it. They've been forgotten, or they feel they've been forgotten about.
No, I think they have been.
And abandoned and marginalised. And therefore the consequence of that is that all sense of class identity has been completely lost, where it would be if you stuck this gammon-faced Ryanair passenger in a room with Delcy Gale, ultimately they should be on the same side, because they undoubtedly have the same enemy, which is the establishment and the rich and powerful in this world, who cause whatever individual problems they have. But
otherwise, they wouldn't both have been on Ryanair in the first place.
Exactly. No, quite exactly. And this is, but we are seeing the result of this now. And as you quite rightly point out, these views are nothing new. They've always existed in working class communities. I've known far right racists all my life. They've not gone away. They were just subdued by Blair's PC and
we
Blair's
couldn't capture them on social media.
And this is
there
really
must have been
point.
10 million such incidents have occurred over the last century, but it's only now you can capture them on video.
Excellent point. It's one Nicola made the other day, actually, and you're spot on, quite right. And so, but going back to the other topic we were talking about, which is the People's March, here we are seeing these triangulators, a lot of them again, the likes of Alistair Campbell and Chuka Umunna, who are caught between this faux left-wing ideology and their right-wing capitalist market sensibilities. And I think they have an agenda with this people's vote, and I think it is to divide up the working classes even more. I think that's where it's coming from, because that is what they'll do. That will be the end result of this people's vote, will be more division of the working classes again, which we've been seeing for years, and which encapsulates this whole situation with Ryanair.
Imagine, Steve, Corbyn is toppled. Chuka Umunna is the new leader of the Labour Party. What do you think the result of that's going to be?
Exactly.
I mean, how divisive, how much trouble would that cause? Look, the man should be prosecuted. His behaviour was outrageous. Anybody abusing other people for any reason that they cannot do anything about. In other words, you're not being judged because of what you've done, but because of what you are. This is discrimination, bigotry, hatred, should be dealt with. But it goes back even further than the triangulators. It's the triangulators compounded it. The long decade, I say long because it lasted longer than 10, but it felt like 50 years, believe me. The long decade of Thatcher Reaganomics decimated the working class, and the working classes parties, the Democrats in the US, the Labour in Britain, led by Clinton and Blair, then came to power and compounded all the damage that had been done by the Thatcher Reaganomics period. So the people felt, and they were completely right to feel, well, who speaks for us? Who acts for us? The triangulators then had to divide them, and they divided them on the basis of the identity politics that you described. And even Corbynomics, even the Corbyn political culture doesn't fully, deal with this.
No, it doesn't at all. It's
the least convinced of Corbynism are the white working class in my experience.
Yeah, no, I agree. And a friend of mine and working class academic, Lisa McKenzie, highlighted it quite starkly. I think you read it, actually, what she wrote.
Yeah.
And she says that the sort of Corbyn kind of middle classes and that kind of, the kind of group of people in that have colonised, essentially, academic political debate. They've colonised economics. They've colonised the commentary surrounding politics now, and we're still seeing working class voices excluded. And I do think it's a very dangerous time in this country at the minute.
They could easily be pushed to the right.
They could indeed, and
en masse.
Exactly. And the situation with Delcy Gale is just the thin end of the wedge, in my opinion, of what we could be heading towards. I think worrying times indeed.
Don't eat gammon.
Yes. I'm sure the name Dr. David Kelly conjured up many images amongst our viewers, not least, of course, the man who famously exposed to the world that the dodgy dossier of Tony Blair and Alistair Campbell was just that, a dodgy dossier, and then mysteriously died several days later. This man's story has never gone away. There's never been answers. There's been rumours circulating across the internet for years. However, my good friend Mr. Galloway has some news on this which may interest you. George, I believe you might be doing some work around David Kelly. Tell us.
Yeah, and some people don't like it. I know this sounds sounds ridiculous, and I even hesitate before saying it, but since I announced on Friday that I was thinking about making a film on the strange death of David Kelly, both my iPhone and my computer and my telephone calls have begun to act very strangely. It could be a coincidence, of course, like the coincidence of Khashoggi going to the Saudi consulate. How unlucky. On the very day that 18 men and a bone saw had arrived from Riyadh.
Funny that, wasn't it?
For a day's tourism, including a body double, who then put his clothes on, put Khashoggi's clothes on and a fake beard.
Indeed, yes.
Yeah, with a chin strap.
It's one of those things.
You know, these coincidences happen.
Yes.
Seriously, though, state murder does happen.
Yeah.
Khashoggi was murdered by a state. That's indisputable now. The state has admitted it.
Yeah.
It's said that the Skripals were attacked on British soil by the Russian state. That's far from indisputable. And certainly they didn't bring a bone saw. Otherwise, we would never have known about it.
Well, we probably would have done. They would have been waving it around, wouldn't they?
Yeah, in front of
such
the CCTV.
Expert spies.
Yeah, exactly. Now, David Kelly, in my view, and it's always been my view, did not commit suicide. He was an expert on the biology of death. I mean, a world-renowned expert. He was in control of himself, as anyone who saw him at the select committee 2 days before he died could testify, and it's worth looking back on YouTube at that. But perhaps most importantly, he would have known as an expert on the biology of death that the method of suicide that he chose would not actually have killed him.
Yeah.
And if all of that's not persuasive enough, the fact that in Kew, all the records are locked up for 70 years, 70. No 20-year rule, no 30-year rule, a 70-year rule, which means the youngest person watching this will be dead before we get to know the truth about David Kelly. So I've never believed, and don't believe now, the official story. I don't believe that he committed suicide. It follows that I believe he was murdered. There are two important books that I'm using as a source for the film that I'm going to make. But on top of that, some very, very, very skeptical and very expert witnesses have come forward to me with new information. So, Mr. MI5, Mr. MI6, you can bug me, you can burgle me, you can, well, I'll draw the line at bugger me, but you can do anything that you like. I am going to make the film about the killing of Kelly. if people support it. I'm going to do a Kickstarter, Steve, like I did with the Blair documentary. I'm going to ask for 50,000 again, which I did on the Blair documentary. I asked for 50, I got 164. If I get anything like that, this time I can make a great film with groundbreaking analysis, new theories, and who knows, maybe I'll even solve the crime.
Indeed. I mean, we were discussing this off air, but obviously I saw what you put out on social media on Friday, and I said to you earlier, didn't I, that I think this is extremely pertinent timing for something like this, because while, I mean, we all know that behind the scenes and sort of it's a open air secret, if you like, that of course the state murders people and tries to suppress dissident voices, if you like. The timing is extremely pertinent because you can almost feel the authoritarian crackdown amongst people who do not fit the mold that the state wants you to, and who think outside that kind of box, be it Khashoggi in Saudi Arabia, be it the journalists in Ireland who took police files that were in the public interest, be it the fracking protesters jailed and then last week freed over their campaigning, be it if you look on Twitter at the minute and the amount of activists who are saying that they're having anomalies with their Twitter feeds, that tweets are going missing, people can't see things people are tweeting. The authoritarianism and is kind of creeping.
Facebook is actually censoring completely.
Yep, getting rid of independent media
with
sites.
Millions of followers.
Yeah, Max Blumenthal did an excellent piece on it the other day.
Max Blumenthal's a very good writer.
Yeah.
Mind you, we'll be all right there, won't we? Because Nick Clegg has promised.
Oh, yes, that's all right.
Nick Clegg has joined them as the senior vice president.
He has, yes, indeed. Yes, Nick Clegg.
He's going to live in Silicon Valley with Una King. Not with Una King, but Baroness Una King. She is already there working for Google.
Indeed,
perhaps all these politicians will retire there one day.
It will be lovely. Indeed, yes, I'm sure. I've heard on the grapevine that Nick Clegg is promising not to introduce membership fees for Facebook, but he's already signed off on it.
He signed a pledge that no students will ever be charged for joining Facebook.
But back to my point, I think it's a very good time for this because I feel it. I feel the authoritarianism creeping around the world. But also, of course, we had the revelations the other week that MI5 have been sanctioned to break the law wherever they want, and this was never, if you like, put in the context of this revelation that, and Cameron couldn't do anything about it, that MI5 were essentially given free pass.
License to kill.
Literally license to kill in this country. And I haven't seen any commentators match that up with David Kelly's story and what happened there. No, we now know.
I do think the zeitgeist has aligned perfectly for this film. I think, 166,000 people. How's that?
Yeah.
Got a pound out of each of those.
Exactly.
We've got the film.
Yeah.
166,000. Well, it's actually up now. But in 2 days, 166,000 people engaged with my work on Twitter on this film. And so it's quite clear a critical mass of people are feeling like you about the creeping authoritarianism. They're feeling when they look at the Skripal case, when they look at the Khashoggi case, that actually all kinds of states do wet work.
Yeah.
I believe that Kelly was killed. And maybe by the end of making the film, I'll have a good idea of who killed him.
Fingers crossed. So, but it sounds fascinating. I'm looking forward to it already. That is it for this week's Topple Galloway show, and that's it for a fortnight. I'm afraid the kiddies are on half term, which means that we have prior
half term for Topple Galloway. Taxi!
Half term, hooray. That we have child commitments. So, but as always, don't forget, please keep subscribing to us on patreon.com/Topple. I'm George Galloway. Give us your comments on social media. It's at Mr. Topple, at George Galloway. Keep them coming in. We're dressing more for winter now. I have a jumper on this week, zebra jumper, which is apparently very much on trend, according to Nicola, who dressed me last night.
My wife's got a vintage shop. You should take a trip there.
I know, yes.
Emma Goldman, it's called.
Yes.
Emma Goldman vintage.
Very good things about it. So we're off for a break, but I hope you enjoyed this week's show. Until next time, take care of yourselves.